Hey, what's up, world? Eyes open in California here. So this is part 4 of the oil for your lamp. And part 4 is titled The Promised Land. Okay, so we're going to continue on with this timeline, right? So far, we've covered the period from creation to the flood. And we spoke about the patriarch Abraham. And we spoke about the land of Canaan. And we spoke about the Exodus. So next, we are going to speak about the Promised Land. Exodus chapter 13, verse 21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. So the Israelites were led by a pillar of a cloud in the daytime and a pillar of fire at night. And they were walking through the desert. So this one is called the Promised Land because they were headed to the Promised Land. So first question is going to be, what is the Promised Land? Right? It's a common term that people use, but what is it exactly? Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 through 21. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, "Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaims, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." Right? So basically, the Lord was saying this land right here was going to be given to Abram, who later became Abraham. Right? And Mount Sinai, in case you don't know, is right here in Saudi Arabia. So it's right across from the Nuweiba port in Egypt. So they're finding all kinds of wagon wheels and all kinds of ancient relics, if you will, buried at the bottom of the Red Sea right here, because this is where the Lord split the sea. So the Israelites, they came from Egypt, they came down here, and the Lord split the sea right here, and they went to Mount Sinai, which is in Saudi Arabia. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 24. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours. From the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even unto the uttermost sea shall your coast be. So Deuteronomy 11, verse 24, basically says the same thing. God gave Abraham this shaded area. So right now, the Israelites live in modern day Israel. So this is what was given to Abraham way back, right? And this is where the Israelites live now. So is this the will of God versus the will of man? Is that what this is? Because the will of God was to give Abraham this much. And right now, Israel only has this much, right? That is not even 1/10 of what they're supposed to have. But is this the will of God versus the will of man? This is the question. And this really is one of the biggest causes for the friction in this whole area here is what is what? What's going on here, right? God said this much and man gave Israel this much. What's going on? Well, let's clarify this. So first we need to look into what is the definition of the term the promised land. How are we defining promised land, right? So Exodus chapter 3, verse 8, this is what it says. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. So the Lord came down to deliver the Israelites out of the hand of the Egyptians, to give them a large portion of land, right? A land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land. And It didn't really physically give a border, or he didn't physically give a border, but he listed the people that lived in the land, right here. The place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Well, they all live right here in the land of Canaan. So when the Lord delivered the Israelites out of the hand of the Egyptians, the land flowing with milk and honey is right here, modern day Israel, the land of Canaan. So this is where these people live right here. You have the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, right? And then the Girgashites are in there too. This is the promised land promised to the Israelites when they were brought up out of Egypt by the Lord our God. This is the land. They're in it, right? God gave Abraham this shaded area. So this is the argument. People argue, well, God gave Abraham this shaded area. That's true, right? But this is Abraham's house. All of these people are the seed of Abraham. So all of these people have the right to be in Abraham's land. They're Abraham's seed, right? These are God's chosen people. This is the line, the bloodline that God chose as God's chosen people. And they were promised the promised land, right? So getting back to this, is this the will of God versus the will of man? Well, no, not really. Because this whole area was given to Abraham for Abraham's house. And this area here was given to the Israelites when they were delivered from the Egyptians. So are the people living out here part of Abraham's house? Sure they are. Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 5 through 7. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, in the day when I chose Israel, and lifted up mine hand unto the seed of the house of Jacob, and made myself known unto them in the land of Egypt, when I lifted up mine hand unto them, saying, I am the Lord your God. In the day that I lifted up mine hand unto them, to bring them forth of the land of Egypt, into a land that I had espied for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. Then said I unto them, Cast ye away every man the abominations of his eyes, and defile not yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. This is what the Lord told them, right? In the day when I chose Israel and lifted up mine hand unto the seed of the house of Jacob. So the house of Jacob was given the land of milk and honey. Now this actually is a picture of Israel. Beautiful. Right? So I don't really know how much clearer to make this. The house of Jacob was promised the land of Canaan. So Israel's land can't be divided. It was deeded by the Lord our God. There is only one peoples on earth that were given a deed by God, and it was the Israelites. Their land cannot be divided. So this is the promised land. This is the land flowing with milk and honey. So when the Israelites were released from Egypt and the Lord split the Red Sea and they came out here, they walked around here in the wilderness for 40 years. For 40 years, they walked around the wilderness before they were allowed to cross into the promised land, because they had adopted a lot of the ways of the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were pagan. And the Lord was trying to get them all out of there. They didn't want any pagan worship going on in the land flowing with milk and honey. So for 40 years, the Israelites walked around the wilderness. Deuteronomy chapter 34, verses 4 through 7. And the Lord said unto him, This is the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, saying, I will give it unto thy seed. I have caused thee to see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not go over thither. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor. But no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. So Moses was not allowed to enter into the promised land. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. So Moses wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. He came out of Egypt, returned back to Egypt to free the Israelites, to free God's chosen people. He led them out of Egypt, or the Lord led them out of Egypt, but he was the leader of the people on the ground. And he led them around the wilderness for 40 years. And then he was not allowed to enter into the promised land. He actually died in the land of Moab, which is, the land of Moab is where Sodom was. Remember that map where Sodom was? So God's chosen people were finally allowed into the promised land, right? The 12 tribes of Israel. So now let's go through the house of Jacob. These are the 12 sons of Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. These are the 12 sons of Jacob. This is the house of Jacob. The house of Jacob was promised the promised land, right? So here they are right here. But you'll notice that the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, when it was split up and the house of Jacob were given their lot, they were given their portions of land, the list of landowners does not match the sons of Jacob. So I'm going to explain this to you right now. So here is the promised land, right? All these names over here on this list, the land of Israel, these are all portions of land that these people had. But if you'll notice, there's no area called Levi, right? There's nowhere on this list where there is the land of Levi. You have the land of Reuben, land of Simeon, land of Judah, but there's no land of Levi. And there's a really easy explanation for this, because the Levites were spread through all the lands because they were the priests, and their job was to take care of the temple. So they were all the priests that ran the churches. And this is the reason why people pay tithes, because the Levites did not have land of their own. They were just absorbed into all the other lands, right? All the other tribal lands. So in Manasseh, they had Levites. In Asher, they had Levites. In Naphtali, they had Levites. So people paid their 10% tithe to support their local Levites, because the Levites didn't have land of their own. They were the caretakers of the temples. That's why people paid the tithes to church, was to support their local Levite, right? So the tribe of Levi did not have any portion of land. So they're not on this list, right? And then we have Joseph. There's no land of Joseph over here, right? And there's a good reason for that, right? You see it right here. There's no land of Joseph. The reason is because Joseph had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And these two were given land. So Joseph is not here in the tribal lands of Israel, right? And that's the reason why these lists are not exactly the same, in case you ever wondered, right? Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. So Moses stayed back on the other side of the Jordan River, and Joshua, basically Moses tapped out and Joshua tapped in. So Joshua took over. He crossed the Jordan and he crossed into the promised land and became the new leader of the Israelites in the place of Moses. When the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, Joshua was placed in the leadership position. He was neither a king nor a judge, but he took care of business. So Joshua was not a judge. The judges actually started here with Othniel, the first of the judges. Judges chapter 3, verse 9. And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. So Othniel was the first judge, right? So here's something you might not know. Israel was the center of intercontinental trade by land. This is the reason why the Israelites were God's chosen people, and this is why Israel was God's chosen land. Because if you wanted to do any kind of business from over here, West Europe, to Africa, and you had to do business by land, you had to pass through Israel. That was the trade route. If you wanted to do business from Africa to Asia, you had to go through Israel, because this desert over here was brutal. It was very brutal. It was better to go up through Israel and to go where there was more water, where water was more abundant, because the animals that you had in your caravan, they would die of thirst, literally, and the people would too. So Israel basically there was like a big crossing right through Israel, and they were supposed to be the model for everybody. Everybody who walked through there was supposed to say, wow, look at this place. This place is amazing. Look at the architecture. Look at the people. Surely these people are favored by God. And then people would say, I want to know their God. Maybe we will be as blessed as they are, right? That was the intention. That's not really quite exactly what happened, but that was the intention. It was the trade route, because over here was these mountains that were really, really harsh, and the composition of the soil was so bad, it was so jagged, that it would even cut the feet of the camels. Not even the camels could cross it. So people were pretty much corridored to go through Israel. Israel was supposed to be the model for the world. So this is the end of part 4. That is the promised land, right? And this is the leading cause for the friction in the Middle East area right now. Is there's the argument, what is the promised land, right? Well, I just showed you what it was. The house of Jacob was promised the land of Canaan. Abraham's house was promised that whole portion of land, but Canaan specifically, the land of Canaan specifically, which is now modern day Israel, that is what was promised to the Israelites when the Lord delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians, right? And that land cannot be divided. It was deeded by the Lord our God. So thank you. God bless you.